that's the area where we saw entirely new neurons with visual properties develop.
Hmm.
So there were very few neurons that even responded to images before. But after this unsupervised learning, we saw like a large population emerge that actually had visual response properties. Now, this was restricted to this particular set of medial regions, uh, but it wasn't the only change that happened in the system. There were also changes that happened in the primary visual cortex, in other high order visual areas. It's just that these areas already had neurons tuned to stimuli before, that were selective to stimuli before, especially primary visual cortex responds strongly to visual stimuli. It's just that the patterns of responses, the tuning changed.
Hmm.
And the tuning changed in kind of a gradual way um, towards towards a place where when an animal was experiencing the same kind of repetitive corridor for many, many days, it would start to essentially develop an entirely new dimension of neural space just for that corridor. So like the same way we're talking before that, neural computations are extremely high dimensional. It turns out that over time, things that repeat a lot, things that we might form into visual memories, kind of start to stick out from the cloud and develop their own dimension that's orthogonal to all the
Hmm.
other dimensions
Hmm.
that existed there before. And so this process is kind of, it's more one of changing the angle of a population vector rather than introducing a whole new set of neurons like what we saw in the medial areas.
Mhm, mhm.
So
And
that's
what
a
might
very
what
different.
yeah, what might the behavioral advantages be of that type of operation? It's intuitively you might think, okay, so the brain is sort of making it easier to pick out this thing that you're very familiar with and therefore probably have to interact with more or something like that.
Yeah, I think the gradual nature of the process, where it actually took kind of a couple of weeks for this dimension to kind of really stick out and be completely separated. It's the gradual nature of the process that gives us the insight here, because in the beginning, let's say animals run through this kind of leafy corridors, there's leaves on the walls. If we put them into another corridor that also has leaves, but kind of in different places, different, doesn't it looks the same kind of abstractly, but it's a different location, let's say in this forest. Then they still respond in that environment as if they think that there should be reward in there. Like they respond in a similar way. And that we think is arising from the similarity of visual representations, right? So as you're forming a memory of a place visually, you might be forming, some abstract leafy places are all good. They all give me rewards. So whenever I see a leafy place I should lick, I'm going to get reward. But then with time, as you start seeing the same place so many times, it gets kind of seared into your brain,
Hmm.
right? It's
Hmm.
this, and I think it's an experience a lot of us have when we recognize something that we've seen a lot, just kind of see a pattern and we know we've seen this before, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
That is called visual recognition memory.
Yes.
As visual recognition memory develops, it develops for very specific exemplars. It develops for specific instances of the world, not for like the general concept, not just for leafy places in general that are good. This particular leafy place where there's a tree to the left and a tree to the right and some bush and this place, this is what's good. And that requires a very specific memory for that particular pattern. And we think this dimension kind of sticking out of the cloud is an instantiation of that memory being formed and being very specific to that place.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's a way to make a place stick out because it's important because you get water there or something good or something like that.
Yeah, and you've seen it so many times that you can recognize like very small details and know if
Yes.
small detail has changed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and presumably the memory of that location is much higher resolution than other locations.
Yep, exactly. It's a high resolution, yeah,
Hmm.
version of it inside of your internal
Hmm.
model.
And when we talked about supervised versus unsupervised learning, I was starting to think like, okay, obviously we can discriminate between supervised and unsupervised when you guys create a whole situation where you introduce the labels or the conditions for the reward. Like it is supervised in that sense. But actually, when you step back and think about it, especially when you think about it for simpler and simpler organisms, in what sense do they ever get like something supervised? Like almost everything in their life is going to be a form of unsupervised learning. Is that reasonable to think about?
It gets almost everything in their life will be a form.
Yeah. In what sense is there supervised learning for like a fruit fly in the real
Yeah.
world?
So I think that that's where we bring in something, called reinforcement learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is it's often being distinguished from these two. Um, Reinforcement learning is more about, getting reward, getting good outcomes for actions that you take.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's kind of more inherently of a kind of a low dimensional computation because you only get so few rewards in the lifetime. But then if you have a good algorithm, you can kind of figure out what led to that good reward.
Yeah.
What sequence of actions led to that good reward? How does that relate to the sensory environment?
Mm-hmm.